A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thanks so much for tuning into another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is great to have you with us today. On the program here in just a matter of moments, we're going to talk with Jim Wallace, the executive director of the Gun Owners Action League in the state of Massachusetts, where Governor Charlie Baker, Republican governor, has declared that gun stores are non-essential businesses, apparently reversed course for a matter of moments, literally, before changing his mind again this week. You also have the Attorney General of Massachusetts, Maura Healey, going after gun owners. You've got the state police shutting down all training, including virtual training, online training in the state of Massachusetts during the state of emergency. It is absolutely unbelievable what is going on there. And we'll get to that in just a matter of moments. We do have a couple of headlines to get to, though, before we talk with Jim. First of all, the National Instant Check System numbers for the month of March were released on Wednesday afternoon. That's really quick, by the way. Normally it takes a few days for the FBI to compile these numbers, but I have a feeling that just based on the numbers that we saw, the FBI wanted to get that information out there as quickly as possible. So the non-adjusted numbers, just the raw numbers, and this includes background checks for things like FOID cards in Illinois that happen every day, 3.7 million background checks performed in the month of March. That would be a new record and the second time in NICS history that more than 3 million checks were performed. The National Shooting Sports Foundation released their adjusted NICS figures. So they look at the coding of these background checks and they say, okay, well, that's for a FOID card. We'll disregard that one. This looks like it's for a firearm. We'll keep that one. They estimate about 2.5 million firearm background checks performed in the month of March. Now, if you go in and you were lucky enough to be able to get 2 or 3 firearms, that's only going to show up as one NICS check, right? So we don't know the number of firearms that were sold. If you went back to a gun store twice, that's one person, but you might have gone through 2 background checks. So we don't even really know the total number of Americans who purchased a firearm, but we can do some pretty good guesstimates. And based just on anecdotally what we're hearing from gun stores around the country, it is, I think, highly likely, that we have more than 1 million new gun owners in this country. Americans who did not own a firearm in February, but now own one in April. And that is a staggering number. That number would be even higher were it not for people like Governor Phil Murphy, who shut gun stores down for almost 2 weeks in New Jersey. Governor Tom Wolf, who did the same thing for almost a week in Pennsylvania. Los Angeles County Sheriff Alex Villanueva, who was back and forth. Gun stores can open, they have to close. Gun stores can open, they have to close. Northern California, where a coalition of Second Amendment organizations have now filed suit. You've got, City of San Jose, Alameda County, a host of other counties, Santa Clara County, I believe, as well. All of which have shut down gun stores. And in Massachusetts, gun stores shut down. So imagine if we hadn't seen those actions taken by some local governments, this record number of background checks and the incredibly high number of new gun owners would be even larger than it already is. And that's one of the most egregious problems with the deprivation of our Second Amendment rights right now. Clearly, there are Americans who want to exercise their right to keep and bear arms for the first time in their lives, and they're being told that they can't by their state governments, including in Massachusetts. Let's bring in our friend Jim Wallace, Executive Director of the Gun Owners Action League, to talk about the latest. Jim Wallace with the Gun Owners Action League. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program right now.
Hey, Cam. Once again, welcome back to the Second Amendment battleground state.
It is indeed a battleground. I mean, I don't know that we've, look, obviously these are extraordinary times for all of us, but what's going on in Massachusetts is absolutely unbelievable. And it's not just the governor. We've got the Attorney General to talk about as well. But let's start with Governor Baker, who, initially had declared that gun stores were not essential businesses, had changed his mind, and then yesterday changed his mind almost immediately again and said, no, gun stores are going to have to close. What's going on, Jim?
Yeah, ever since this crisis started, it's been a pattern of discrimination against gun owners, retailers, you name it. And it started with, it's going to be a few weeks now. We had passed protections for licensed gun owners as far as renewals goes back in 2014. so that if you actually got your renewal in, all you had to do was submit it and you get a receipt, and your license is valid for all lawful purposes until they do something with it. And that's, boy, that's showing up to be so serious right now and so important. But even with that, we had talked to the Major City Chiefs Association, the Mass Chiefs Association, and said, listen, why don't we ask for an emergency order from the administration just to put off all of this, to free up your officers so they don't have to worry about dealing with us right now. New licenses are a problem, but, everybody who has a license, just extend everything so you folks don't have to spend resources on us right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chiefs were all on board. Yep, that's a great idea, Jim. They're doing it for virtually every state-issued license, whether it's, doctor's, driver's license, you name it. And we tried for a week. The Chiefs tried, we tried, and eventually we were told your request has been denied. We're not going to do it. So that kind of started things off.
Yeah. So before we even go any further, so that means, what does that mean exactly? If your license expires during this time of emergency where they're not renewing licenses, do you become an illegal gun owner?
No, we said, and most of the towns are really being very good about it.
Uh-huh.
They're telling everybody we're not going to take applications for new licenses, but a lot of the towns are actually being very cooperative. You can either drop off your paper application. Some are doing it by email. Some are doing it like we're doing it right now. So that's okay. But what we were trying to do is free up law enforcement resources. So we're okay, really, for the most part, but we're trying to free up resources because more and more of these officers are getting sick and law enforcement numbers are dropping exponentially. So we were trying to be helpful, and the administration said no.
Okay. And so that was sort of the first inkling of what you guys were dealing with. And then that just got compounded here with the order that gun stores were essential businesses, which lasted for what? Just a matter of hours, it sounds like?
Well, even before we get to that, there was a second shot across the bow. And a few weeks ago, the state announced an emergency fund that small businesses could take a loan from to help them get through this crisis and keep their employees paid. And there were 5 businesses that were listed as ineligible, and the firearm industry was one of them. So they specifically excluded firearm retailers from being able to apply for these emergency loans. So that was strike 2.
And this is while gun stores were told you had to close, right?
Well, at that time, it was a little gray area because in the essentials list, which comes down, I think the federal, what's the federal?
The DHS CISA guidance? Yeah.
The CISA guidance was a little bit gray area-ish because it said, if you're supplying to public safety officials, which almost all of these retailers do,
mm-hmm.
not just guns and ammo, but, PPE stuff and other safety gear. So they were like, we're not sure. What are we supposed to do? Some stayed open, some didn't. And then, they weren't sure. So moving forward now, I guess it was Tuesday that the governor was asked during his daily press conference if he had reviewed the new CISA, advisory.
Right.
And because he was talking about trying to open up construction sites and things like that, which, by the way, the construction companies are fighting him on. They don't want to open up their construction sites, but that's a different story. So he said, yes, we're looking at the new CISA guidelines. After this press conference, we will be posting up our new guidelines. So we waited, and then we went up online and found them. And it's like, wow, look, word for word, what the federal government had done for manufacturers, retailers, shooting ranges, everything. And so hey, good news, folks, here you go. And so we posted it up on our social media. We sent out an alert. Within an hour of doing that, we started getting emails. Wait a minute, you guys aren't telling us the truth. This isn't what it says. So we had to go back and look at the document. It had been amended within an hour to take out retailers and shooting ranges. And I called the governor's office, and they said, yep, we did that. And I said, why'd you do that? And they gave me the standard line about trying to fight the coronavirus and this and that. And I'm like, thinking to myself, yeah, you're giving me this line, but you specifically targeted these people. I mean, we can still go out and get our favorite cheeseburger, our latte, not that I drink it, but, a pizza or anything you want, liquor store, but you're going to target the firearms community and tell them, no, you have to shut down. So they changed their minds literally as soon as we posted it, almost like they didn't realize what they did. And then apparently they got calls from the Attorney General, the Speaker of the House saying, you can't do this. This is a threat to public safety. So, that's strike three.
This is amazing. And so, right now, gun stores in Massachusetts, I want people to be clear about this. Not only are they being told you cannot open, but they're also being told you cannot apply for these loans to carry you through this current emergency so that you can reopen when this is over.
Correct. Now, one thing we've been told through kind of back channels is some of these retailers are also, I'm trying to remember the designations.
Like hardware stores, things of that nature?
No, manufacturers. And some of them have contracts, government contracts to supply certain things. Back channels are saying that you can still conduct that business because it's essential, but they're not putting it up as such. So they're kind of just telling people, okay, you can still fulfill your contract stuff, but you just can't act as a retailer. So, it's amazing what's convenient for government, and then suddenly they realize, we shouldn't do that. So it's okay for us, but not okay for you.
Absolutely. And what I'm going to say, Jim, I mean, we just saw the national NICS numbers released yesterday. According to the National Shooting Sports Foundation, their adjusted NICS numbers, they take out, the background or the checks for, permits and things of that nature. They estimate 2.5 million firearms were sold in the month of March. And, what we're hearing anecdotally around the country is about, in many shops, they're saying about half of their customers first-time gun owners. So I think it is probably safe to say there are 1 million Americans who did not own a firearm in February who are now gun owners. And that number would be even higher if we had gun stores open in states like Massachusetts, New York State, if New Jersey hadn't shut down its gun stores for a week and a half. We know that this demand is out there. Right. We know that more Americans are choosing to protect themselves with a firearm right now. And yet the governor of Massachusetts is saying, no, you can't. Unless you are currently a gun owner, your right to keep and bear arms is denied.
Well, the other thing, too, Cam, is in Massachusetts, you can only buy ammunition from a licensed retailer. It's illegal to buy and sell ammunition amongst ourselves. Now, we could go to New Hampshire or Maine or whatever, but, then we're traveling, we're going into stores, so, we're possibly bringing it to other states. But in Massachusetts, you cannot sell ammunition unless you have a license to do so. Can you say, well, I got a case of 9mm, I'll trade you a couple boxes for a pack of toilet paper? I don't know. But, but the problem is they're shutting down basically a constitutional right in Massachusetts.
Absolutely. And then we get into what the state police are doing, what Attorney General Maura Healey is doing, because the state police, they sent out guidance, was it yesterday, saying that all firearms training, even virtual training, online training, has to stop?
Yeah, which I was shocked about because I understand maybe they don't want people in the classroom, even small groups, but especially with the new gun owners, the amount of new gun owners we have across the country suddenly, it's very important to maintain training levels. And even if it's not an official course, I get it. If it's not, an approved NRA course or an approved whatever course, but still, let's do some virtual training. Even if it's just, hey, we put up quick videos, our trainer, John Green, how to break down a handgun, how to, just little quick videos. So now I guess we can't even do that. And it's just absurd. So I have a call into the state police about that because I would think they'd want to encourage virtual training.
Absolutely. We saw in Pennsylvania, the Bucks County Sheriff actually worked with the NRA and held basically a live webinar online. Hundreds of people tuned in just to get, again, that the basics. And nobody is suggesting that this, replaces, going to the range and taking an NRA basic pistol course or anything like that. But again, if the ranges are closed and you want people to have some sort of training, okay, well, you've got to be flexible too. And what we're seeing in Massachusetts, I mean, honestly, Jim, what you're describing, this is just absolutely asinine. You've got, so-called gun safety organizations that are trying to prohibit people from getting any sort of gun safety training right now.
Right. And they want to close the ranges. They want to close training. They want to close virtual training. They are shutting down access to financial help for these stores. And it just goes on and on and on. It's pure discrimination, and that's what we're calling it now. Well, it's a pattern of discrimination.
Absolutely. I mean, this tweet from Maura Healey, the Attorney General in Massachusetts: gun shops and shooting ranges are not essential businesses during a public health emergency. We cannot undermine the safety of our police officers, first responders, and domestic violence victims. I mean, you've got the Attorney General of the state of Massachusetts basically saying that anybody who exercises their constitutionally protected right to keep and bear arms right now is undermining the public safety.
Well, is a threat. I mean, she's saying that we're a threat to law enforcement. And wait a minute, how about all the women that actually do exercise the Second Amendment so they're not victims of domestic violence? And she's saying that we are a threat to domestic violence. It's just unconscionable.
So what are you doing right now? What's Gun Owners Action League doing in Massachusetts? I know you said you're talking to the state police about the training issue. Is there the possibility of litigation here in the near future, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, the standard answer, we're exploring everything right now because so much has happened in the last 24 to 48 hours that we have to put all this stuff together and figure out how we can attack back.
Yeah.
So whether and if we do anything, from what I'm, just talking to everybody, it's going to have to be through federal because our state courts are shut down. They're closed. And quite frankly, I wouldn't bring a case to our Supreme Judicial Court anyway because they're all packed with Charlie Baker's minions that hate the Second Amendment. So, and that's another problem. He had an historic opportunity because I think he appointed 4 of the 7, and all 4 were anti-Second Amendment people. He could have changed that court overnight for us. Instead, he went the other way.
On the Supreme Judicial Court?
In Massachusetts, yeah. So our only hope is federal court at this point, but we have to be very cautious and careful about how we word such a case. And are we going to go the Second Amendment route? Are we going to go just civil rights discrimination? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that we have to think out, and I totally understand that people are angry. They want us to move right now. But sometimes you have to think these things through to make sure that you're not going to feed the other side a victory.
Oh, no, absolutely right. And people do need to understand that. This is a state of emergency. But if you bring a bad case, you run the risk of generating bad law. Right. There's not a lot of precedent here for judges to go back and look and say, OK, well, what happened when we did this before? Because we've never really been in this situation before. And so you're right. You do have to bring the strongest case possible. Unfortunately, that does take some time. But we just saw yesterday, for example, a coalition of Second Amendment organizations filing a federal lawsuit in Northern California against, I believe, 8 different jurisdictions and several individuals within those jurisdictions. But again, regarding the gun store closures, but those closures have been in effect for a couple of weeks. It's taken that time to gather up all of the information, file that, get your best arguments laid out, and present those, in a brief. So it's not going to be instantaneous. But I am really glad to hear that you guys are looking at this and trying to figure out where your next steps are going to be. So what do you want gun owners to take away from this right now? You're not going to take this lying down, right?
Oh, no. Matter of fact, when we put out the alert yesterday, and here's another thing. We put out an alert yesterday. I sent it to you, that 2-page alert. It's very long, but people needed to know the background of the system or rather, discrimination over the course of 2-3 weeks now. So we asked him to call the governor's office and reverse his decision. And apparently we clogged up the phone lines pretty good. Some people said they were waiting online for 20 minutes just to talk to some people. But we were also getting messages back from members who had called and said, no, the people I talked to at the governor's office said you were lying about the ranges and the stores closing. That, no, they're considered essential. And of course, you go back on, you check and say no. And even some of our legislator friends called and in the governor's office, and the governor told them, no, that's not true. They're not essential anymore. So even our members are getting mixed messages from the governor's office. Granted, the people you're talking to could be interns and maybe they don't understand things,
right?
But you'd think they'd want a consistent message of what's happening and what's not happening. And to accuse us of lying just to get our members ginned up, I mean, come on, how bad are we going to get here, right? So,
well, look, I mean, that's the thing, and we've seen this around the country. You don't need to lie to your members to get them ginned up. I imagine they're pretty ginned up right now. Just from trying to go to their local gun store, or from trying to go to the range, or from trying to renew their pistol license or their Class A license. I mean, this is, and what we're seeing in Massachusetts, honestly, Jim. I mean, even in New Jersey. Governor Phil Murphy said when that CISA guidance came out, the revised guidance said, "All right, I it's not what I would want to do, but it's what we're going to do because here's what the guidance tells us." Right. It's shocking to me that an anti-gun governor like Phil Murphy would do that, and there in Massachusetts, Charlie Baker's siding with the gun control lobby and saying, "No, we're going to keep these stores closed."
Yeah, it's pretty sad. And Cam, I don't want to go without saying that we recognize what's going on.
Yep.
That even if stores were open and ranges were open, they have to be very careful about how they're operating, follow all the protocols. We put out a club advisory a few weeks ago, and we didn't tell them yes or no. We don't want to be telling people what they should and shouldn't do. But if you're thinking of doing stuff, here's all the things you need to consider. So we're not being, disingenuous or, just throwing aside what's happening.
Right.
We understand what's happening. But again, if you can get your favorite cheeseburger and your favorite pizza and your favorite coffee, you can't exercise your Second Amendment in Massachusetts?
Yeah.
That's just absurd.
It is absurd. So, and I'm glad that you pointed this out, Jim, because you're right. Even in states like Pennsylvania, where Governor Wolf originally closed gun stores and then said, okay, you guys can reopen, but you have to do it by appointment only. You've got to clean the area of the shop where customers are between visits. Look, we all understand that these are not normal times. And I think all of us as gun owners are flexible right now. We understand it's not business as usual. We're willing to make these adjustments. But there's a difference between saying, okay, here are the new procedures, and yes, it's gonna be kind of limited, and it's not gonna be the way it used to be. We can roll with that. We can work with that. But when you tell people simply no, we're shutting off access to your constitutionally protected rights right now. That is a bridge too far, and that is where and when gun owners do have to respond by filing litigation, by calling the governor's office, by saying this is absolutely unacceptable. It's not that we're completely inflexible. I think we're quite flexible right now. But one thing, you can only bend so far, and we're not going to break when it comes to infringing on our constitutional rights.
Well, that's just it. I mean, even in times, especially in times, which we learned back. I mean, you and I, how many conversations did we have about Katrina years ago? And our civil rights being just destroyed down there. So we learned a long time ago that it was important, especially during a state of emergency, to protect people's civil rights. And I mean, maybe I'm wrong, Cam, and maybe you've heard other things. So far, this is the only civil right that's being infringed in Massachusetts, as far as I know. Maybe churches are being asked to do something different. But
I don't think they're being, so I'm not familiar with how churches are impacted in Massachusetts, but I can tell you in Virginia, Governor Northam has said basically no more than 10 people can gather at one time.
Sure.
And that includes churches, but that also includes gun stores. Both are open.
Right.
So if you've got a church and you can put 9 people in a Sunday school classroom and 9 people in the next one, and you can hold services that way. A lot of folks are holding services online. That's not an option when it comes to the Second Amendment because of the laws that are already in place. You can't stay at home and order a gun online and have it shipped to your house. Not possible, right? You can't do that. So,
and I have seen that at least on the news, that a lot of churches are doing the virtual, congregation. Which is awesome. But you know what? We were just told we can't.
Right. You can't do virtual training. So you're right. I mean, the First Amendment may have some additional regulatory hurdles, but nobody is saying you can't speak your mind. Nobody is saying that, the freedom of the press has disappeared. You're right. It is the Second Amendment that is being targeted in Massachusetts right now. And it looks like the Second Amendment only.
Yeah. Yeah. Gonna keep us busy, unfortunately, while we're home. So, but we are still working. I want to let everybody know we're still working. All of our employees are working from home. I actually set goal up, 2 or 3 years ago, so that we could completely work remotely. The only thing we have to check is the mail every once in a while. But what we do is make sure that we can coordinate amongst employees and no more than one employee in the office at a time to check things, and then we take all the precautions we have to. But, we live in an area you can get snowed in for a week. So we set this up years ago to make sure that we could still operate and do our best to protect the Second Amendment here in Massachusetts. And here we go, because we're being told to stay at home. We're busier than ever now.
Well, I'm glad that you guys are working. And again, if there are Massachusetts gun owners out there, I know that times are tough for a lot of us, but if you can support the Gun Owners Action League, and if you're not a Massachusetts gun owner, support your state organizations, support the Second Amendment organizations, because, again, they're fighting these fights right now. And these battles, unfortunately, are not free. It costs money to file these lawsuits. It costs money to get attorneys. And so even though times are tough, whatever support you can offer, I know is going to be greatly appreciated.
All right, Cam, thanks for everything, and stay safe.
Hey, Jim, thank you, sir. We'll talk again very soon. Jim Wallace from the Gun Owners Action League joining us here on Bearing Arms, Cam & Company. We will bring you any developments that come out of Massachusetts in the days ahead. Right now, let's get to our armed citizen story, our recidivist report, as well as our good deed of the day. We'll start, however, with our recidivist report from the Farmington Daily Times in Farmington, New Mexico. New Mexico, by the way, another one of those states that the governor has ordered gun stores to shut down, declare them to be non-essential businesses. But take a look at this headline. Man convicted for armed robbery of a Cricket wireless store released from jail. Convicted of armed robbery and released. The Farmington Daily Times reports that the DA's office had sought the maximum prison sentence for a man convicted of a 2018 armed robbery, but during a hearing, a judge ordered the man released from custody on probation. 39-year-old Stephen Maggie of Farmington, sentenced on March the 30th in Aztec District Court by Judge Curtis Gurley to time served and 5 years of supervised probation. He was incarcerated at the San Juan County Adult Detention Center from June 2nd, 2018 to March 30th of 2020, serving about a year and 9 months at the jail. The hearing held after Maggie pleaded guilty to a second-degree felony count of armed robbery on February the 10th by signing a plea agreement. Maximum sentence, 9 years, with an additional mandatory year for using a firearm. So he could have gotten 10 years behind bars. Instead, he served less than 2 in the county lockup, and now he's a free man. Adam Bell, the attorney for the defendant, said his client agreed to the plea agreement because he was ready to take responsibility for what happened. And he said, quote, given the facts and circumstances surrounding the case, it was a fair and just sentence. The prosecution, on the other hand, asked for that full 10-year sentence. Office believed that was an appropriate sentence, saying, quote, any armed robbery with a firearm is a terrifying situation for the victim. Yeah. And again, in New Mexico right now, you're putting violent criminals back out on the street after a slap on the wrist. Law-abiding citizens who are concerned about their personal safety, who are not currently gun owners, cannot acquire firearms and ammunition because the gun stores are closed. There may be some retailers that sell items other than firearms and ammunition that also sell guns and ammo, that they are allowed to remain open. Walmart, for example, is open, but they're no longer selling. I don't even think they're selling ammunition in New Mexico because of the universal background checks that are taking place. So they've stopped selling. Actually, they're not selling any firearms in New Mexico. They might still be selling certain calibers of ammunition, but remember, Walmart has already backed away from selling handgun ammunition, .223. So, you're not going to be able to get common calibers. Again, at the same time, we're seeing violent criminals put back onto the streets. Law-abiding citizens are being told, you're on your own. Hey, call the police. We'll get there when we can. But sorry, unless you planned ahead and bought a firearm and ammunition before all of this happened, you're out of luck right now. And again, I'm not an attorney, but even in a state of emergency, your rights do not disappear completely, which is what we're seeing happen. Our armed citizen story of the day from Florida, Ocala, Florida, where a bar fight led to a fatal shooting, a self-defense shooting there in Ocala, Florida. This from the Legal Herald. This was back on February 29th. 3 people were wounded. One of the 3 later died from his injuries, 56-year-old James Wallace. Police responded to reports of a shooting at the Jade Lounge in Ocala. They found 3 wounded men in the parking lot. But when officers reviewed the security footage, what they found is that these 3 guys walked up to a gentleman who was sitting at the bar. One of the men then punched the guy who was sitting at the bar. The other 2 pushed him down to the ground. That is when the individual who was sitting at the bar, minding his own business, drew his firearm, shot the 3 attackers. According to police, all 4 men were known to each other. The nature of the relationship unknown. All 3 men were hospitalized. Again, 2 survived. One succumbed to his injuries. And according to the Legal Herald, authorities do consider the shooting to be self-defense. No charges have been filed. Looks like no charges will be filed there in Ocala, Florida. Finally, our good deed of the day today from Boston, Massachusetts. A Boston police officer stepping up and helping out a single mom who was struggling to buy her groceries. Ben Paguro is a rookie officer. He was working a detail on Huntington Avenue. Saw the woman crying outside of a Shaw's supermarket. He said he walked up to her, started talking, learned that she did not have enough money to buy groceries for her family, that her kids were at home due to the coronavirus. And that is when Officer Ben Paguro walked inside the store with the woman, spent $225 out of pocket to buy groceries for her and the family. He said, quote, "I felt bad for her, and I'm just glad that I was in a position to help her, honestly." He said, "What really brought me to be a police officer is that I enjoy helping people. I really get satisfaction out of that." So in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Boston Police Officer Ben Paguro, thank you, sir, for your good deed. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Camp & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program today. Don't forget, tomorrow, noon Eastern, we're going to do a VIP Gold Editors Chat at BearingArms.com. Send in your questions, your comments. We'll be answering them live for you on Friday afternoon. And you can become a VIP Gold member right now. 25% off. Just use the code CORONA when you visit Bearing Arms or any of the other Town Hall Media sites like Hot Air, Red State, Pajamas Media, Twitchy, townhall.com. Also, you can subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube. You can subscribe to Bearing Arms Camp & Company on Apple Podcasts. That way you never miss a program. And be sure to check in at BearingArms.com throughout the day for the latest Second Amendment news and information. Until we talk again, be safe, be well, be free. And we'll see you here soon with another edition of Bearing Arms Camp & Company.